Welcome, dear listeners, to History with Herodotus, where we embark on a journey through the annals of time, exploring the intricacies of human civilization and the grand tapestry of our collective past. Today, we set our sights on a most fascinating subject: the origins and legacy of the British Empire. This vast and complex entity, which once spanned across a quarter of the world's land area and encompassed a fifth of its population, has left an indelible mark on modern history. To grasp the essence of this empire, we must first venture back to the earliest stirrings of Britain's rise to prominence. In the misty dawn of British history, we find the ancient Celtic tribes, whose fierce warrior culture and rich spiritual traditions would eventually give way to the influence of Roman rule. The Romans, with their engineering prowess and administrative acumen, brought a measure of stability and order to the island, leaving behind a legacy of roads, cities, and governance that would endure for centuries. As the Roman Empire began its slow decline, Britain found itself beset on all sides by invading forces: the Anglo-Saxons from Germany, the Vikings from Scandinavia, and the Normans from France. Each of these influxes brought with it a unique cultural imprint, shaping the language, customs, and politics of the British people. The Norman conquest of 1066, in particular, would prove a pivotal moment in British history, as the feudal system and French culture were imposed upon the Anglo-Saxon population, giving rise to a new ruling class and a distinctively English identity. Throughout the Middle Ages, Britain's monarchs vied for power with the nobility and the church, their struggles and alliances forging a complex web of relationships that would underpin the nation's future growth. The Magna Carta, signed by King John in 1215, stands as a landmark document in this process, establishing the principle of rule by law and limiting the monarch's authority. This foundational text would go on to inspire constitutional movements across the centuries, shaping the course of British history and beyond. As we approach the threshold of the modern era, Britain's gaze begins to turn outward toward the seas and the possibilities they hold. The Age of Exploration, which saw European powers like Portugal and Spain establishing trade routes and colonies around the globe, would soon draw Britain into its orbit. The Tudor dynasty, with its larger-than-life figures, Henry VIII, Mary I, and Elizabeth I, navigates this new world of maritime commerce and imperial ambition, laying the groundwork for Britain's eventual emergence as a dominant world power. It is against this rich backdrop of cultural exchange, political intrigue, and expanding horizons that we find the seeds of the British Empire taking root. The early Tudor period, with its tumultuous mix of Catholic and Protestant influences, sets the stage for the complex religious and ideological currents that would drive Britain's colonial endeavors. The establishment of the Church of England, under Henry VIII's guiding hand, marks a critical juncture in this process, as the monarch assumes spiritual authority and paves the way for a distinctly English brand of Protestantism. As the Church of England solidified its position under Elizabeth I's wise and pragmatic leadership, Britain's colonial ambitions began to take shape. The year 1583 marked a significant milestone with the establishment of the first English colony at Roanoke, in present-day North Carolina, under the auspices of Sir Walter Raleigh. Although this initial foray into colonization ultimately ended in failure, it paved the way for future endeavors and demonstrated the growing interest among the English nobility in exploring and settling the New World. The early 17th century saw a surge in British colonial activity, with the founding of Jamestown in Virginia in 1607 and the Pilgrim settlement at Plymouth in Massachusetts in 1620. These fledgling colonies, though often struggling to survive, represented the vanguard of British expansion in North America. The granting of charters to companies like the Virginia Company and the Massachusetts Bay Company facilitated this process, as they were empowered to establish settlements, trade with indigenous populations, and exercise governance over their respective domains. As Britain's colonial footprint expanded, so too did its involvement in the complex web of European politics. The 30 Years' War, which ravaged the continent from 1608 to 1648, drew Britain into a series of alliances and conflicts that would ultimately contribute to its emergence as a major world power. The execution of Charles I in 1649, following the English Civil War, marked a watershed moment in British history, as the monarchy was temporarily abolished and a republic established under Oliver Cromwell. Cromwell's reign, though marked by significant military victories and administrative reforms, was short-lived, and the Restoration of 1660 saw the monarchy reinstated with Charles II on the throne. This period also witnessed a significant increase in British colonial activity, particularly in North America and the Caribbean. The establishment of the Royal African Company in 1672, which held a monopoly on the slave trade, would have far-reaching consequences for Britain's colonial empire and the transatlantic slave trade. The Glorious Revolution of 1688, which saw William III and Mary II ascend to the throne, marked another significant turning point in British history. The Bill of Rights, enacted in 1689, further limited the monarch's authority and enshrined certain fundamental rights, such as freedom of speech and protection from cruel and unusual punishment. This document would go on to influence constitutional developments not only in Britain, but also in its colonies. As the 18th century dawned, Britain found itself increasingly embroiled in a series of global conflicts, including the War of the Spanish Succession and the War of the Austrian Succession. These wars, fought against rival European powers like France and Spain, would ultimately contribute to Britain's emergence as the dominant world power. The establishment of the British East India Company in 1600 had already laid the foundations for British expansion in India, and by the mid-18th century, Britain was poised to become the major colonial power on the subcontinent. The year 1756 marked a significant milestone with the outbreak of the 7 Years' War, which would see Britain emerge victorious but at great cost. The war marked a major turning point in British colonial history, as it led to the acquisition of significant territories in North America and India. The Treaty of Paris, signed in 1763, formally ended the war and ceded vast tracts of land to Britain, including all French territory east of the Mississippi River. As the 18th century wore on, Britain's colonial empire continued to expand, with the British East India Company playing a dominant role in Indian affairs. The company's influence extended far beyond trade, as it began to exert significant control over the subcontinent's politics and governance. This period also saw the rise of prominent figures such as Robert Clive, who would become instrumental in shaping Britain's colonial policy in India. The late 18th century was marked by significant challenges to British authority, including the American Revolution, which saw the 13 colonies declare independence from Britain. The Treaty of Paris, signed in 1783, formally ended the war and recognized American sovereignty. This event had far-reaching consequences for the British Empire, as it led to a re-evaluation of colonial policies and the eventual abolition of the slave trade. The 19th century saw Britain's empire reach its zenith with the establishment of colonies in Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. The scramble for Africa, which began in the late 19th century, saw European powers, including Britain, compete for control over African territories. This period was marked by significant conflict, including the Boer Wars and the Zulu War, as well as the exploitation of African resources and labor. As the British Empire expanded, it also faced growing criticism and opposition, both from within and outside its borders. The Indian Rebellion of 1857, also known as the Sepoy Mutiny, saw widespread unrest and violence in India as native troops rose up against British rule. This event marked a significant turning point in British colonial policy, as it led to the dissolution of the British East India Company and the establishment of direct British rule over India. The 20th century saw the decline of the British Empire, as nationalist movements and independence struggles gained momentum around the world. The aftermath of World War II saw a rapid decolonization of Africa and Asia, as Britain granted independence to many of its former colonies. As Winston Churchill once said, "The empire will survive as long as the English language survives," highlighting the enduring legacy of British culture and influence. Today, the legacy of the British Empire is complex and multifaceted. While it brought significant economic and cultural benefits to many parts of the world, it also perpetuated exploitation, inequality, and violence. The empire's impact can still be seen in the modern-day borders, languages, and institutions that exist around the world. As historian Niall Ferguson has noted, the British Empire was a remarkable institution, which did more to shape the modern world than any other. The origins and legacy of the British Empire is remembered today as a testament to the power and influence of human ingenuity, ambition, and culture. Its impact can be seen in everything from the spread of democracy and capitalism to the global diffusion of sports, literature, and music. That's all for today's History with Herodotus. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, remember that to understand the present, we must first understand the past.